We're at the IAS meeting in Kuala Lumpur. We're here with Estaban Burrone, who is with the Medicines Patent Pool, and we wanted to discuss some of your work in greater detail. We talked with Caitlin. We want to make sure that you cover as much as you can, so we really get a grasp of what the organization does and what it is.
Be a pleasure.
So start with the maybe a little bit of the origin, how you got going and how important the work is.
So the Medicines Patent Pool was an idea that's been floating around for some time, since back to the Barcelona International AIDS Conference, and it had been in the air, but it never really materialized. And then when UNITAID was created, UNITAID is an international organization which is based and hosted within the World Health Organization, with a very strong mandate to work on issues relating to patents and intellectual property issues in the field of HIV in particular, but the mandate of UNITAID also extends to tuberculosis and malaria. The idea of actually establishing a patent pool for HIV medicines started to materialize and began to be discussed within the board of UNITAID, and eventually became a reality a couple of years later. And the idea is really trying to see how do we ensure continued access to the newer HIV medicines, which are increasingly patented in the developing world. And the way we do that is by reaching out to the pharmaceutical companies and trying to establish a collaborative approach with both originator pharmaceutical companies, generic companies that produce the more affordable versions of antiretrovirals, and with a very close engagement with the communities of people living with HIV and with governments. So it really is try to sort of bring all the stakeholders around the table and ensure that the newer antiretrovirals that are often better tolerated, with lower toxicity, and recommended by the World Health Organization, become available at affordable costs in developing countries.
Developing and low income, middle income? Exactly.
So the purpose of this is try to make it as many people as possible benefit from this type of initiative, and the mandate is to try and obtain as many low and middle income countries as we possibly can, within the context of a voluntary process where really our key challenge is convincing, is working with the pharmaceutical companies and making a good case for how important it is to enable access to as many people as possible.
Do you find any, what can you describe the pushback when there is pushback? What the response is, if there's some contention, if there's some reason that they give? Do you have any of that kind of?
So pushback from the pharmaceutical companies, yes, from the patent holders?
Yes.
So I think what we're proposing is a very innovative model. It hasn't really existed before in the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry traditionally has based its entire business model on the existence of patents. That's what it gives exclusivity over its new medicines, and what enables the pharmaceutical industry to recover the costs of investing in research and development, which is a very expensive endeavor. What we are proposing to the pharmaceutical industry is a mechanism for sharing their intellectual property and enabling others to compete in the market, and that competition is what brings the price down. So it's a very innovative way of operating, and so it's something that requires a lot of discussion to raise the level of comfort within pharmaceutical companies, to understand how we operate, to understand how this new mechanism can deliver. And that's what takes time. Of course, the other key issue is that being a voluntary mechanism, it means you will be able to get what you manage to convince them that they should be doing, and so we can have very strong ambitions of how far we want to go, but it will be the result of a negotiation. The actual result will depend on how convincing we are and how much we manage to get pharmaceutical companies to play game with this initiative. And I think it's an incremental process where we're gradually seeing more and more companies coming to the table. when they see one of them playing ball, that helps to get the next one in, and all of a sudden this new idea looks hopefully less and less scary and more like an innovative mechanism that can actually deliver something that meets everybody's objectives.
That's what I was going to ask about precedent setting, because you can get to the bar, you can say, okay, this company did that, this company did that, and what leverage you have with that other company that's already done something,
right.
Good. You've done negotiation well with them and so forth.
Well, I think there's two sides. Definitely, we aim to constantly raise the bar, have better and better licenses that provide access to more and more people. And we're learning by doing. Really, as I said, this is new. It's never been done before. So it's not going to be perfect to start off, and gradually I think that there's a learning curve, and there's certainly a great understanding of how we can achieve more. And I think companies themselves also, as they become more comfortable to work with this mechanism, also begin to be more creative about how to make it work better, and also all the other stakeholders we work with. Working with communities of people living with HIV all over the world, reaching out to them, understanding what are the issues and how can we make sure that whatever we're doing actually meets their needs in the end, because otherwise anything that we're doing really doesn't serve any purpose if it's not actually serving, at the end of the day, those who actually need the drugs.
So you have some sort of an archive of patents and so forth. You must have. It's a lot of homework you do before you go into a negotiation. Can you tell me about that?
Right. So the way we do this is we basically start from a medical perspective. Talk very much with people involved in sort of the latest HIV research, with the World Health Organization. We work very closely with them, medical experts around the world, to identify what are those medicines that we should be targeting, that look particularly interesting, both those that exist today, but also those that are in the pipeline, those who will likely be very important a few years down the line. Because if we don't do that, then there's a risk that there are groundbreaking new treatments that make it that reach people in developed countries, and only many years later begin to arrive to developing country context. So we want to shorten that time gap. So that's what we're trying to do. Because
there's that need, just as there is in every country,
absolutely,
for the second, third generation drugs.
Exactly. And you want to make sure that you have public health considerations, that you're getting the best, that people have access to the best possible medication, not necessarily the only one they can afford, but the affordability ultimately should not be the key criterion. The criteria should be what is the best possible drug for that person in that particular context. So that's the first step, is looking at the medical side of it. Once we've identified that, the next step is understanding, okay, where are these medicines patented? To what extent is there a patent issue here that needs to be addressed? To what extent are these drugs already available at an affordable price or not? Do we already have generic competition or not? And if not, is this related to intellectual property or patents? So in doing that, that is actually quite a complex task, because what it has required is for us to collect data on over 25 antiretrovirals in as many developing countries as possible. So we have this data on about 80 different developing countries. We're constantly collecting more of it, understanding what is patented where, and as we were collecting all of that to inform our discussions, we realized that was actually a really useful resource for a lot of people out there who did not have this data. And so we actually just made it all publicly available on our website, and is today referred to as the Patent Status Database on antiretrovirals. And it's a very widely used resource. I mean, we know that many of the key procurement agencies and international agencies that are procuring medicines are using it on a very regular basis. The Global Fund, the IDA Foundation, UNICEF, they're all very regular users of our database because they find it a very useful resource. Enables them to understand when they can buy generic medicines that are available, in which countries they will need to buy the originator medicine, etc. So that's become. So once we have these two sources of information, what's medically the most important, what's patented where, that gives us a good indication of what should be our priorities. Which are those products for which we should be negotiating, getting licenses, and we can actually have an impact on access down the road.
How often do you reset or set your priorities?
We do that once a year. We issue a document on our priority, on the priorities of the medicines patent pool. We issue it first as a draft for consultation with people. We try to get as many inputs as possible.
And where do you get the input from?
So we get it from different sources. We consult medical experts, we consult people in the communities, we consult various international organizations involved in these issues. Of course, now, for example, with the release of the new treatment guidelines by the World Health Organization this week, we need to revise our priorities to make sure that we are in line with what is being recommended today, because we want to make sure, as I said, that whatever we do is in line with what the international community has set as its objectives.
And do you have other partners, so to speak, other than the medicines patent pool folks? Come to a meeting? Do you share in the negotiation responsibilities, or do you kind of do it on your own? Or I'm just trying to get a picture of how you do it. Do you have serial meetings? Can you describe how your
with the pharmaceutical companies or generally?
With the companies, yeah.
So with the companies, these are actually quite lengthy processes. That sometimes can be a source of frustration. One want to see results coming very, very fast. But I think, as I said, when you are in a discussion with a pharmaceutical company and you're offering something which is so new, you need to get into a discussion that gradually raises the level of comfort, makes clear what are the key issues and concerns for each side, and try to come to common objectives. So it's not something that can be done in a day. It's something that can take months, in some cases even years.
But you build on each experience with them.
Absolutely, and we very much try to make sure that that doesn't become a process that's totally isolated from what is happening outside. So there is this negotiation ongoing, but that negotiation should reflect what the international community is advocating for. What are the key challenges that are happening out there? We see, for example, a lot of concern these days about access to second-line medicines in many developing countries, where they're often a lot more expensive than the first-line medicines. Sometimes you don't have the right combinations. And now increasingly even third-line medicines. So people who actually have developed resistance to first-line and second-line medicines, requiring access to the last generation of medicines, and so making sure that we can contribute to that effort.
Do you do any work around resistance testing and trying to get the prices of those tests down? Because that's obviously a piece of the whole picture.
Absolutely. It is a piece of the puzzle. Right now we haven't focused on that. I think there's a perception of the issues being quite different around diagnostic tests, and I think
there's not a lot of fat in there. I think that's what they told me. They're not making a lot of money on that, so that
could be it. I think
so. Maybe it's better to go after.
It operates very differently. The industry, the way the diagnostic industry operates is very different from the pharmaceutical industry for medicines, and I think. We've been asked very often whether we should get into this, and our reply is we've got quite a lot of work to do still in the HIV medicines field, and let's make this work. Let's walk before we run. In a sense,
well, I think it may be more in the responsibility of, say, physicians and so forth to get a sense on how important resistance testing is, to know what, obviously you're not going to give people drugs that are not functional.
Absolutely.
That'd be a horrible waste of money. And once you get a person established on the new regimens that are working, it is critical that you work on adherence, which usually is not a problem in developing countries, because they seem to be very, very conscientious about their treatments. But the main thing is to get a sense of, okay, if you're not going to handle it, maybe you see how can you source it out to a group of doctors who can maybe be a little more aggressive and say, this is what we need, however we can get this testing, this is how often you need it.
Right. Well, we're very much aware that we are working I mean, our key competence and our work is really one piece of what is a much bigger puzzle. I mean, we have to be very much aware that even if we do manage to make an intervention that on paper would look fantastic and could potentially deliver a lot, that's not necessarily going to happen unless a lot of other things happen. I can give you many examples of that, but of course, the fact that there being funding for buying HIV treatment and for scaling up is absolutely crucial. You can have the best drugs in the world, cheapest you can imagine, but if there's no money to buy them, there's no money to buy them. So continued scale up will depend, and getting people on the best possible will depend on that. Another example I can give you is in the field of pediatrics. We're making a very special effort to try and ensure that we can develop the new fixed dose combinations required for pediatrics. And there are about 9 different fixed dose combinations that are needed in order to implement the new treatment guidelines for children. And many of those don't exist today as combinations. And we do know that fixed dose combinations increase adherence and make it a lot easier and often a lot cheaper for people to take them. So we want to work on that, and we are already working on that. But we're very much aware that on our own, it won't be enough for that really to happen and for those pills to reach in the kids that need them. So much more needs to happen. That's why it becomes very important for organizations like ours not to work in isolation. And to
I was going to say that we just had a press conference with Annette Sohn from AMFAR and the folks from Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, and of course John Pottage from ViiV Healthcare, who answered my question on how strictly important it is and considerably important it is for them to really focus at the right doses and the right formulations. In fact, they said they don't even bring the drugs to market that may not be appropriate or may not be useful or available in pediatric formulations. So that may be a bar by which they've said they have to meet.
Absolutely.
To make them pass through that.
And if there's several things that need to happen. I mean, one of the concerns of the pediatric market is that it is actually a relatively small market. And that of course makes it sometimes a lot less attractive for both originator pharmaceutical companies, but often sometimes generics as well, to enter this market, to develop the drugs that are needed, which is an investment, and then if there is not necessarily a prospect of recovering that investment over a reasonable period of time. So we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware that developing some of these new formulations may require clinical trials, which also requires funding. You need people that will be setting the right dosages for the different drugs that need to be in a combination, with taking into consideration that you need to give these pills to kids that have different ages. So you need to be able to find the right dosages that work for all the different age groups, and all that is very complex and requires a whole range of different expertises. And what we bring to the table is expertise in the field of patents and intellectual property, a mechanism that allows for that collaboration to take place, where the different parties bring to the table what they have, and the licensing is a mechanism through which that collaboration can take place.
Right. The science is really the key piece that I think so many, and that may be part that you would not necessarily focus on too much.
Well, we definitely want to make sure that everything we do responds to the latest scientific evidence. Right. And the scientific, I mean that in many different respects. I mean that in terms of the medical sciences, what it is that are the best possible treatments, but also what are the social sciences teaching us. I think we should not lose sight of that.
Human behavioral is very important, because I know that the first thing out of our mouths when we thought about treatment for people living in Africa was that they don't have clocks. The infrastructure is not there. They're not going to know when to take drugs, and we were horribly wrong with that. And
Absolutely.
I think that the due diligence by parents now to get treatments for their children is amazing.
Absolutely.
So I don't think we should worry. We should be, watchful, but I think and understanding that we have to make things easy. Also, the other thing is the heat issues for formulations that are not in whatever capsule form, if they're sprinkles or whatever. are they, is there excursion temperatures? Are there, criteria by which we can't make them reasonable for very hot climates?
So that's one of the key things that we're very much aware of, is always, not falling into the temptation of looking at the whole issue from Geneva, where we are based, and thinking that, that's the reality everywhere. We have to be very much in touch with what's happening at the ground.
On the ground.
What are the requirements there? And the point you made about heat-stable formulations is a classic one, which is very much there, and you still see it as a real problem with a lot of pediatric formulations. You see pediatric formulations which unfortunately require refrigeration, and that makes them not suitable for many of the settings where the greatest number of children with HIV live. So there's that mismatch between what is available and what's actually required, and you see pediatric formulations not only with that problem, but also having an alcohol content that is significantly superior of what any of us would want to give to our own kids. Right. So, how do you match that reality on the ground? And even things that we might not necessarily think of, but if you're trying to give a medicine to a child every day, and often more than once a day, if it tastes absolutely horrible, that will make it very difficult.
We went through all of that with Norvir.
Yes.
Those are the early days of Norvir.
And it's still very much the case. I mean, the formulation existing today for lopinavir ritonavir for children. Actually, I tasted it last week and it really
it's so hard to disguise it.
It's very hard to disguise it.
We tried chocolate, we tried applesauce, we tried all kinds of things.
So there are people who are now working on that, and that's great. Really trying to taste mask it and make formulations that are suitable. But so there's the Drug for Neglected Disease Initiative is working on a very interesting project to develop that, and we're very much in conversation with them to see how can we support that process and where they may be facing intellectual property issues, so that we can work together and try to address them and ensure that if they succeed in developing this new formulation, that it is available anywhere in the world where it's needed at an affordable price.
Well, Esteban, I think we could talk all day because you have so much to cover. But in light of the fact that people probably don't want to watch an hour or two of video on you and we probably ought to end. But I do want to say that you should probably give some information. This may be on your website. You could, if it isn't, you could go to your website from here. Can you say what that is, and we'll make sure that.
Right, so our website is www.medicinespatentpool.org, and we try to communicate as much as we can with everybody, with all stakeholders about the work we do. We have a newsletter that we try to send out as often as possible, and I would encourage people to get onto our website, to sign up to a newsletter, so they're up to date on our work, and to feel free at any moment to get in touch with us, to find out more, to challenge us, to question us, to suggest ways in which we should be working so that we can be more effective in what we do.
And maybe collaborate.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much, Esteban.
Thank you very much.
Very appreciative.
Thank you.